Hi, I'm Mirabai Starr.
And I'm Willow Brook, and I've been working with Mirabai now for a couple of years, and we have some exciting things we want to tell you about that have been brewing, that are growing.
Yeah, it's just sort of naturally bubbled up from the wellspring of our connection and a lot of the work that I've done around grief and loss as a spiritual path, as a kind of holy opening to that sacred field that our souls yearn for. And Willow has responded so deeply to that. It's given me a lot of encouragement to continue growing that work in the world, especially in these times when people are in such pain and there's a lot of fear about what's coming.
Yeah, and I've been in a lot of different settings where you've done your teaching around the portals of grief, and I remember that was one of the first things I connected to the most deeply with your work because it put words to something that I had already experienced of really seeing grief as a portal, as an invitation to transformation. And then I've witnessed, how that teaching lands in so many of the communities and the spaces that you teach in, and how people are like, oh, hungering for more of it. And yeah, seeing the need, especially since COVID, I feel like there's a readiness or a change, a shift in the way that people are seeing loss and grief. And what do you think?
Yeah, they're not running from it anymore. It seems like people used to be so allergic to any talk about death and dying or grief and grieving that it was very few people, and usually only the desperate, who would come to these gatherings. But now Willow receives most of my communications, and there's just this onslaught of please, can there be a space to hold us in our grieving? Not that's just a psychological remedy, because that's actually not my area of expertise or Willow's, but rather people who can detect, like I call it the fragrance of the sacred that's permeating the wound of loss, and want to go in rather than turn away. So we Willow actually suggested, why don't we create some kind of online community? Maybe eventually it'll grow into more in-person gatherings, but for now, a deep, intimate space where people can gather around this longing for transformation, not despite but through the I don't know, the beautiful wound, as Teresa of Avila called it. For Teresa of Avila and John of the Cross and a lot of the mystics I love, they use the term beautiful wound to describe that connection. This is where I think you really resonate. One of the many places you resonate. Between the connection between the pain of grief and the longing for God. So that's the sweet spot, even though I get allergic to God language myself sometimes, but I think you know what I mean, and you certainly know what I mean.
Yeah, and that deep path of seeking that we both have been steeped in, and that so many people that are drawn to your work have been too.
Seekers.
Yes, yes. And I think about too, so we went to Mexico for Dia de Muertos. Mirabai was invited to do a retreat with our friends Patty and Pili, and there was really sacred things that happened at that time of year there. And the community that came together in that space feels like an especially potent example of what we're trying to create, of like people bringing their broken open hearts and meeting each other there and being able to hold each other, not to fix each other or change anything, but just be together and let that be the invitation to transformation.
Yeah, Dia de Muertos in Mexico was a huge turning point for both of us in coalescing this vision. And it's not just about talking and telling our stories, although that's certainly part of it. And it's not just about drawing on the teachings of the mystics of multiple spiritual traditions, although that's part of it. It's also very embodied work. Willow is a master of chanting in a couple of different traditions, in Sufism and in Hinduism, kirtan and zikr, and also body practices, yoga and dance and hiking and other kinds of modalities that integrate this experience of grieving, as well as silent meditation, guided meditation, and writing practice. Writing as a spiritual practice.
All the good, juicy, contemplative things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it feels exciting that we get to do this kind of soft announcement that this is coming, and that in the coming year, the calendar year, as it approaches spring, we're going to be building this, and would love to also hear from you and people that are intrigued and interested, and what it is that you're seeking in this area, like the flavors of offerings that would really speak to you as well. That would be sweet to know as we build it and really solidify what's going to happen and be birthed in the spring.
And just so you know, as long as we're giving you a sneak peek, our working name for this community is Wild Heart. So this is the Wild Heart Way, or Wild Heart Ways, because there's no one way to walk this path of transformation. And both of us have been deeply intrigued with butterfly imagery. The caterpillar dissolving entirely inside the chrysalis and emerging as something completely new.
Cycles, the birth and the death and the rebirth, and
Right, it's not a one-time deal. It's a continuous cycle of melting down and re-emerging. So we'd love to have you join us. Thank you, Willow. Thanks for doing this with me.
So exciting. It's going to be really beautiful.
Very beautiful.